So today I have an interesting lens for the Fujifilm X Mount, and it's a shift lens, and it's also a ultra wide zoom lens. We have the Laowa 12 to 24 millimeter f5.6 zoom shift lens, and I've been testing this lens out for a couple of weeks now, and I would like to share my findings with you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, let's start with the build quality. If you are familiar with the Laowa lens, it looks like any other Laowa lens, but with extra steps, and I'll get to the extra steps in a minute. You have the focusing ring, which feels nice and dampened. It's not loose as some of the other manual lenses out there, which is great. And after that, this is where things get tricky because you have the focusing ring right here. So you sort of have to train yourself to have muscle memory on where things go. So this is the zoom function. You can see the barrel go back and forth. At the bottom here, you got the aperture ring from 5.6 all the way to f22. And the bottom of that is where you're going to do your shifting, and at the bottom here, the ring right here is where you're going to do the shifting. And you see this lock right here, you unlock that, and then you get to shift the lenses around by twisting this. I don't know if you can see that. It shifts a little, and after that you can rotate the lens too. You press this button right here and then you can twist it, and this is how you make things look a little bit interesting and get everything. So it's an interesting lens. You really have to again, have muscle memory and remember where things are placed. Like I said before, you can go as wide as 12 millimeter all the way to 24 millimeter. 12 to 24 on Fujifilm would be around 18 to 35. There is one thing that I have a gripe about, and that is the differentiation between the zoom and the aperture dial. Sometimes I would actually knock the aperture over, or sometimes I think that the zoom is the aperture and vice versa. So it does get a little bit annoying in that sense. And just be mindful of all this thing that's happening. Laowa also says that this lens can shift plus and minus 7 millimeters. And apparently this is the first zoom lens ever with a shift function. Now, most of these features before were exclusive to prime lenses only. So Laowa is doing something unique by adding this feature in an ultra wide zoom lens. Overall, this lens is a solid build lens. Everything about this lens feels premium. It has a nice weight to it, a nice aesthetic. A shift lens lets you shift the lens optics relative to the camera sensor, and its primary purpose is perspective control. So here's what it actually does. What the shift lens, what it does is it corrects vertical lines for you when photographing tall buildings. Pointing your camera upwards makes them appear to lean inwards, so a shift lens can correct this by shifting it vertically, keeping the lines parallel. It also avoids distractions in architectures. It keeps buildings straight and proportional without needing like software adjustments afterwards, which is saving you a step. It also creates panoramic images by shifting horizontally and stitching multiple images together, so you can create seamless panoramas without rotating the camera. I tried to use this lens for its intended purposes. So I went out, took some pictures of interesting buildings around the Algarve or around my area, and tried to see if the shift lens does what it's supposed to do, which is correct vertical lines. So this shot right here was set up on a tripod. There's nothing wrong with it, but here it is corrected with the shift function. I did some adjusting to the lens, and this is the final product that I got. Now, as you can see, the lines are a bit straighter, and what I like about this lens is it's almost distortion free. I don't see much distortion around the corners. Everything just looks great coming from this lens. Now, I've done this a bunch of times throughout my testing with it. I thought that was pretty cool that it can correct like vertical lines within the lens, so you don't need to go fix it in post. So that's a really interesting feature to have. So if you're someone who prioritizes straight vertical lines, so I'm looking at someone like real estate photographers, architecture photographers, this is something that you guys may be interested in. Another thing I use the shift function for, and this is one of my favorites, is to create panoramas to give me that wider perspective, which is pretty cool. What I've been actually doing was taking 3 shots, one normal, one +7 shift, and one -7 shift. And I merged these photos together to create a panorama shot. With these sets of photos, I actually made 3 landscape photos into one wide vertical shot. And you can see how much wider this shot looks. And I like this feature a lot because it's so precise. The problem I have with creating panoramas before is physically moving the tripod, and sometimes you may move it too much, and sometimes you don't move it enough to capture the landscape that you want. The shift function keeps it very neat because you shift one way and then you shift a few the other way, and then you come back with a panorama. And I've done this a few times with this lens, and I really like using it like that. When it comes to image quality, I'd say it's pretty solid. At f5.6, you're going to get a sharp image. I stick close to like 5.6 and f11. Anything higher is going to result in softer looking images and as well as diffractions. I also find the flaring on this lens to not look so good. There are certain instances where the sun is hitting the lens and it just does not make for a pleasing photo at all. So you got to be mindful of shooting this towards the sun. Now, when it comes to the images I got, I was pleased with the look from 12 millimeters to 24. 12 to 24 millimeter lens is not something that I shoot with often. However, the more I shoot with it, the more fun I have with it. And I tend to shoot everything on the wide end just because it's a focal length that I'm not used to, and I think everything looks so funky on the wide end. I was shooting a bunch of buildings over here, and I was very pleased by how the lines looked. Everything was straight, nothing looked weird or out of the ordinary for me. I was able to capture these straight lines with ease. Now, speaking of funky, the minimum focusing distance on this lens is 15 centimeters. It's insane how close this lens can get. When I shot this logo of the Mini Cooper right here, the front element of this lens was almost touching the logo. That's how close it was. And because of its close focusing distance, you can get some unique perspective as well. Now, the only gripe that I have with this lens is the zoom and the aperture dial are a bit small, and I get confused on the dial and where things are. And if you look at any other lenses that does what this lens does when it comes to, like, you know, shift and tilt, you're going to find that they are mostly prime lenses, and they are coming in around like $1,000 or $2,000. However, they are just prime lenses, so you're stuck with that focal length. This Laowa lens is a zoom lens. It's also an ultra wide lens, and it has that shift function as well. And it's coming in at $700. And I think Laowa said that this is the first lens of its kind to be ultra wide and to have it shift like this. Comparing it to what is out on the market right now, this lens is a bargain for the price. So if you're someone who knows that you need these features, this could be money well spent. Other than that, I had a lot of fun using this lens creatively, shooting straight lines, shooting buildings. Seeing how straight it can look in a photo is totally underrated. Architecture is something that I'm not great at, but it really challenges my brain creatively, and I do enjoy that. I enjoyed the ultra wide lens, and I do find the zoom to be very convenient as well. And Laowa is one of those companies that churns out like some incredible and unique lenses at a fraction of the price. And this lens is no exception. Anyways, if you're interested in this lens, I'll leave the links down in the description below. And what are your thoughts on this lens? Do let me know in the comments, and consider subscribing for more gear review videos like this. And thanks so much.